We're jumping right in today with a collection of White House materials from the end of December 2025.
Yeah, a really interesting mix.
They synthesized several recent presidential actions, everything from trade and infrastructure to some pretty big healthcare funding announcements.
So let's get straight to the feedback.
Okay. First up is a major policy announcement. This is the huge injection of funds into rural healthcare.
The $50 billion number.
Exactly. The White House calls it an unprecedented $50 billion investment through their new Rural Health Transformation Program. It's $10 billion a year, starting in fiscal year 26.
And the language around it is very specific.
Very. They call it historic, they tie it to the working families tax cuts legislation, and then immediately they say every single Democrat voted against it. In all caps, I should add.
Right. So that's the core of our first point. The presentation of the Rural Health Transformation Program, while detailing a significant investment, risks prioritizing political opposition over clear policy context, and that really weakens the perceived objective value of the aid.
Okay, but let me push back on that for a second. In today's media environment, doesn't that partisan framing actually work? I mean, you guarantee a headline, you get your base fired up, it's a political win.
It is a political win, you're right, but I think it's a short-sighted one.
How so?
The weakness is what that extreme partisan focus does to the program's integrity. When you lead with the vote count, you immediately frame this as a political football, not a unified national commitment to rural health, which is what it should be.
Think about it from the perspective of someone in a small town. The message they should get is, help is here for your well-being, not our side beat their side in Washington. You're essentially making the aid feel conditional.
Conditional on the current administration staying in power. Like it could just vanish after the next election.
Exactly. So the suggestion for improvement is to just relentlessly focus the communication on the concrete, measurable benefits for regular Americans. You have to establish the effect of the money, not the political fight to get it.
So less about the politics, more about the patient.
Yes. And for some concrete examples, instead of leading with that vote count, you lead with the impact points that are already in the release. They're buried, but they're there.
Like the workforce development and modernizing facilities.
Right. Use the state-level numbers. Talk about the $272 million for Alaska or the $281 million for Texas. Frame it as, this funding means your local clinic can finally upgrade its diagnostic equipment, or your county's getting 3 new nurse practitioners to help with mental health shortages.
Make it tangible.
Make it about them. Show the immediate local impact. That makes the policy feel durable and real, not just like a talking point.
That's a strong pivot. It shifts the focus from who gets credit to who gets care. Okay, let's move on to trade policy.
A very different animal.
It really is. We have the proclamation on adjusting imports of timber, lumber, and their derivative products. This came out on December 31st.
So what this does basically is delay some planned tariff hikes until 2027.
Right. The increase on upholstered furniture from 25 to 30%, and on kitchen cabinets and vanities, which was a huge jump from 25 to 50%, that's all deferred.
But, and this is the key point, the existing tariffs are staying. 10% on raw lumber, 25% on finished goods. And the justification for all of this is a Section 232 national security finding.
Which brings us to our next point. The reliance on that Section 232 national security justification for tariffs on things like kitchen cabinets, it invites some pretty constructive skepticism about who this policy truly benefits.
It feels like a stretch, to put it mildly. I mean, connecting imported kitchen cabinet doors to the defense of the nation?
It's a real leap.
And that's the structural weakness here. Section 232 is supposed to be for emergencies, for protecting industries truly critical to national defense. You know, steel for warships, things like that.
Not bathroom vanities.
Not bathroom vanities. So when you use it for common consumer goods, it raises the question of whether this is really about protecting the nation or just, protecting specific domestic businesses from competition. It feels like deceptive wording, frankly.
And the person who pays the price is?
The average American consumer. Absolutely. Delaying the hike is a nice bit of symbolism, but that existing 25% tariff is a direct hit on the budget of any family trying to renovate a kitchen or furnish a home.
So you're basically taxing a middle-class family's home improvement project under the guise of national security.
That's what it amounts to. And the communication doesn't do nearly enough to justify that link. So the suggestion here is pretty straightforward. You either have to provide a much more robust public argument connecting these specific products to defense, or you reframe the whole thing honestly.
And what does an honest reframing look like?
It looks like calling it what it is: an industrial policy to support American manufacturing jobs. Acknowledge that there's a trade-off, that consumers will pay more. Stop hiding a subsidy behind this sort of implausible security threat.
That would at least be transparent.
It would. And for a concrete example of how to improve, the proclamation mentions productive negotiations with other countries. Okay, we'll explain that. What does that mean? Are you aiming for quotas, anti-dumping agreements? Give the public the economic analysis that justifies the 25% tariffs instead of just falling back on this very severe and frankly questionable national security claim.
The consumer is bearing the cost. They deserve a justification that's intellectually honest.
Exactly. And using a justification that feels stretched just erodes public trust for when you might actually need to use that authority for a real threat.
Okay, that's clear. Let's look at the final area. This one is about consistency. We have two veto messages that came in.
H.R. 131 and H.R. 504.
Water project. And the veto rationale is perfectly clean. It's all about fiscal principle.
The argument is that it forces federal taxpayers to bear even more of the massive costs of a local water project.
Simple. It establishes a clear principle. We're restoring fiscal sanity. No more federal handouts for local projects.
But then you get the second veto, H.R. 504. This was for the Miccosukee tribe, for flood protection. And here, the rationale gets messy.
Very messy. The veto message explicitly links the tribe's request for about $14 million in flood protection to their unrelated political actions. It says the tribe has, quote, actively sought to obstruct reasonable immigration policies.
It's a jarring sentence to read in a veto message about infrastructure.
And that leads right to the critique. Introducing a non-germane political alignment as a condition for approving targeted local aid, as we see in the H.R. 504 veto, it just completely undermines the stated core value of restoring fiscal sanity. It exposes the whole thing as transactional, not principled.
The weakness is that you're creating a political loyalty test for what should be a straightforward policy decision.
Right. Is this project fiscally responsible? Does it serve a critical need? Those are the questions, not do we agree on immigration.
Exactly. The H.R. 13-1 veto for the Arkansas project is all about fiscal responsibility. It's consistent. But then you get to the Miccosukee bill, and suddenly there's this ideological hurdle that's completely irrelevant to flood control.
It makes the whole fiscal sanity argument look like a convenient excuse that you can use or discard depending on whether you like the people asking for money.
That's the danger. It implies that basic services, human dignity even, are just tools for political leverage. We'll only help protect your homes from flooding if you get in line with our other, totally unrelated policies. That's a fundamental flaw in how you communicate governance.
So how should this have been structured to maintain that principled stand they claim to have in the first veto?
The suggestion is to just separate the veto justification into clean, distinct policy streams. It's that simple. If the issue is fiscal responsibility, stick to that. And frankly, they had a decent fiscal argument to make.
They did. The veto message mentions the camp was built without authorization in a low-lying area.
Right, so use that. For a concrete example, you just remove the politically charged sentence about immigration. Delete it entirely.
And keep the focus on the fiscal argument.
Yes. Focus on the fact that the camp was constructed in 1935 without authorization and that it is not the federal government's responsibility to pay to fix problems in an area that the tribe has never been authorized to occupy. That maintains the fiscal principle without the political baggage. It's cleaner, stronger, and more consistent.
It keeps the motive pure, or at least it appears that way. When the communication gets tangled, people start looking for the real reason.
And here, the real reason looks political, which poisons the entire argument.
All right, so to quickly synthesize the weaknesses we've seen across these documents, there are maybe three key rhetorical traps. First, using a major domestic policy announcement not to explain the policy but mainly for partisan effect. Second, relying on these overly broad national security claims to justify tariffs that hurt American consumers. And third, introducing unrelated political conditions into what should be straightforward resource allocation decisions.
And to recap the actionable steps to fix these. First, for the World Health funding, shift the communication to focus entirely on the concrete community benefits and measurable effects. Make it about care, not politics.
Right.
Second, for the tariffs, you've got to either seriously strengthen the public justification for the national security angle on consumer goods, or just be honest and frame it as an industrial protection policy. Align the reason with the reality.
And the third?
And third, maintain consistency in the veto messages. Strictly separate your fiscal arguments from any unrelated political stances. It ensures that your core principle, in this case, fiscal sanity, is seen as just that, a principle, not a political tool.
Making these changes would definitely sharpen the focus and I think the integrity of the messaging.
Absolutely. It's about maximizing the policy's impact by minimizing the perception of political gamesmanship.
We look forward to seeing the improved clarity in your next submission. That's all for today.